Thanks very much. I want to thank NIAA for the opportunity to be here and share with you a presentation that my colleagues and I at the Center for Vet Medicine have been giving across the country for the last 15 months or so. And I know that many of y'all in this room have also been giving presentations regarding the Veterinary Feed Directive rule and our updates. So with that, my attempt is to give you, to the best of my ability, exactly what everybody else across the country has heard. And so we're going to take no more than 25 minutes, I hope, of your time to go through that. So with that, I'll just start right in. On behalf of Tracy Forfa, the Acting Director of the Center for Vet Medicine, and Bill Flynn, the Deputy Director for Science and Policy, we're really pleased to be here to share with you some policy and regulatory updates regarding the use of medically important antimicrobials in animal agriculture. Okay, so as an overview, the outline is to just touch on the surface of the changes that are being made and why, the drugs that are affected and those that are not, what is a veterinary feed directive, what are the key elements of the VFD regulation, and when will these policies and regulations go into effect. So with respect to what changes are being made and why, certainly in this room we don't need to explain that antimicrobial resistance is a complex and multi-factorial issue, having many drivers. One of those drivers is use in human medicine, use in animal medicine, horticultural and other uses. This has been and continues to be an area of considerable scientific and policy debate. Our intent at the agency level was to implement measures that address the public health concerns while assuring that animal health needs are met, and I always repeat the while assuring that animal health needs are met portion of it. I'm going to touch on three guidance documents, 209, 213, and 152. Guidance 209 gives the overview for the antimicrobial resistance policy. It can be boiled down into two key principles. Those principles are to limit the use of medically important antimicrobial drugs in food-producing animals to those uses that are considered necessary for assuring animal health, that is, therapeutic uses, the treatment, control, or prevention of disease in animals, and those uses that include veterinary oversight or veterinary consultation. Guidance 213 followed quickly on that, and it aimed at more of the implementation of the principles in Guidance 213, and I'm just going to touch on two of those. One is timeline, and one is to explain a little bit more about what's meant by medically important. So with respect to timeline, December of 2016 is the target date for all of our drug sponsors to implement changes to the use conditions of the medically important antibiotics in food and water to withdraw approved production uses, such as the increased rate of weight gain or improved feed efficiency. After these label changes have been made, these production uses will no longer be legal. However, the intent is that the therapeutic uses remain, that is, the treatment, control, or prevention of disease in animals, and in part because, at least in some part because the treatment, control, and prevention of disease in animals meets the definition of the practice of veterinary medicine, we're requiring that there be veterinary oversight involved in the use of these products. It's important to emphasize that these principles do not require the veterinarian to be involved in the actual administration of the drug, but rather that the veterinarian authorize the client to obtain and use the product, and that authorization needs to be done by a licensed veterinarian in the context of what we refer to as a veterinary client-patient relationship, VCPR. As a practical matter, once the production claims are removed, this will result in a transition from a marketing status from over-the-counter to prescription for those medically important antimicrobials administered to food-producing animals and drinking water, and from over-the-counter to VFD or Veterinary Feed Directive marketing status for those administered in medicated feed. So which drugs are affected and which ones are not? So the scope of Guidance 213 is medically important, again, administered in feed or drinking water. So this is not including other dosage forms. Injectables, boluses, and whatnot are not impacted by the Guidance 213 transition. And medically important antimicrobial drugs are those that are considered important for therapeutic use in humans. Guidance 213 defines medically important in part by reference to the third guidance I said I would refer to, 152, and it's specifically Appendix A of Guidance 152. As a practical matter, and you'll see in this presentation a number of links that they don't show up well on the screen, but those links are active on the PDF that's published on CVM's website, which are all free to obtain. And at that judicious use website, it lists each of the applications that are impacted by the Guidance 213 initiative. I'm not going to go through all of them. There's several hundred there. I'm just going to, as a brief overview, refer to the antimicrobial class and some of the specific active pharmaceutical ingredients within those classes. Here in tabular form are some of the products for feed use. And I'm going to return to this table in just a minute. Although the majority of our time we've emphasized the Veterinary Feed Directive rule because that's the kind of the major impact of the change, I don't want to ignore the fact that the products in drinking water are moving from over-the-counter to prescription status as well. As an example, here you see Tylosin that's underlined, and the sponsor of Tylosin has already made that transition from over-the-counter to prescription status. So it would be as with other prescription status for drugs administered in drinking water. So we've had a lot of questions about the products that are impacted and which drugs are not impacted, and it's not possible in an entire presentation, much less a single slide, to summarize all of the drugs that are not impacted by the Veterinary Feed Directive rule or the 213 process. But this slide is a distillation of those about which we've received the most questions, organized as those that are antibiotics and those that are not antibiotics. So those that are antibiotics, those that are not impacted, are those that are already authorized under veterinary oversight. Those that already have veterinary feed directive status in feed, examples of those are avilamycin, fluorophenocal, tilmicicin, and recently tivalocin. And as I just mentioned, in drinking water, Tylosin is an example, one of many, several examples of those that are already prescription status for drinking water. Additional antibiotics that are not medically important in human medicine. Examples, the largest category is the ionophores, monensin, lasallicid, selenomycin, and whatnot. Bambamycin, bacitracin, and carbadox are other examples. Other drugs, the second category is other drugs. These are drugs that are not antibiotics. Anthelmetics, beta agonists, coccidiostats are categories of drugs. I want to hasten to point out that these are the non-antibiotic coccidiostats. There are some sulfa drugs that are used for coccidiosis. Those are medically important and they are impacted by the 213. So these coccidiostats are the non-antibiotic coccidiostats. So what's a veterinary feed directive? I'm going to, at the risk of putting everyone to sleep this afternoon, I'm going to read to you the definitions that are in the veterinary feed directive rule. A veterinary feed directive drug is a drug intended for use in or on an animal feed which is limited by, and I inserted in there, Center for Veterinary Medicine, approved application, and that ... is conditional approval or index listing. So those are the three ways that the Center for Vet Medicine reviews applications. So it's limited by a CVM-approved application to use under the professional supervision of a licensed veterinarian. Use of animal feed bearing or containing a VFD drug must be authorized by a lawful veterinary feed directive. So I'm going to define veterinary feed directive next, and then we'll touch on the lawful part a little bit later. So a veterinary feed directive is a written, nonverbal statement issued by a licensed veterinarian in the course of that veterinarian's professional practice that orders the use of a VFD drug or combination VFD drug, and I'll touch on that a little bit later in the talk, for use in or on animal feed. This written statement authorizes the client, and I want to touch on the parenthetical part here. The client is the owner of the animal or animals or other caretaker. So this VFD order authorizes the client to obtain and use animal feed bearing containing a VFD drug or combination VFD drug in accordance, only in accordance with the conditions for use approved by FDA. So we've had a lot of questions about the voluntary approach that's been taken here and whether there's going to be any essentially regulation for enforcement, and that regulation is the Veterinary Feed Directive rule. So I want to just take a minute or two to give a little background on the VFD rule. In 1996, Congress passed the Animal Drug Availability Act, stating that medicated feeds which require veterinary oversight are veterinary feed directive drugs. Then in 2000, CVM promulgated regulations under that statute that went into effect in 2001, and I'll refer to that as the 2001 VFD rule. And as I suspect everyone in this room knows, in 2015 there was an update to that VFD rule, and I'll refer to that as the 2015 VFD rule. But before I do that, I want to just touch on something that y'all are seeing and maybe seeing in the future on the label of these VFD drugs that says by or on the order of a licensed veterinarian. I want to make 2 points about that. The first is y'all have been seeing that on the label of prescription drugs for decades because they say by or on the order of a licensed veterinarian. And so as a matter of animal husbandry and veterinary medicine and frankly common sense, one would think that if it says by or on the order of a licensed veterinarian, this would be a prescription drug. And that's not true as a matter of law. In the Animal Drug Availability Act, Congress instructed us as the agency that neither the veterinary feed directive drug nor the medicated feed containing the VFD drug shall be deemed to be a prescription article by state or federal law. Our understanding is that Congress's intent in creating this third legal category of drugs is to have veterinary feed directive drugs not be prescription drugs by law so as not to fall under the authority of state pharmacy acts like prescription drugs do at the state level. So prior to 1996, we had over-the-counter drugs and prescription drugs. After 1996, at least in animal agriculture, we've had over-the-counter drug, prescription drugs, and now this third legal category, veterinary feed directive drugs. The other point on here where we say by or on the order, so historically we've been referring to an order as a prescription for a prescription drug, which of course makes sense. But we have this third legal category now, the order for a VFD drug. I've gotten myself in the habit of calling it a veterinary feed directive order to distinguish that this is order for a VFD drug and not a prescription drug. Okay, with that little tangent now I'll come back if I can push hard enough on my, I'm not sure anyone's ever heard of Murphy's Law before, but Murphy's in technology, sometimes not so good. Okay, so I've already referred to the 2015 VFD rule. Okay, and the notion that the 2015 VFD rule went into effect on October 1st of 2015, and it has been impacting those drugs that are in veterinary feed directive status, marketing status since then, avilamycin, florfenicol, telmicin, and then as of this summer, tivalocin, which are already in VFD status, or were. So as of December, as I've mentioned, we're expecting the transition from over-the-counter to veterinary feed directive marketing status of all these other medically important antimicrobials administered to food-producing animals in medicated feed. Once the production claims are withdrawn, the therapeutic claims remain. They transition from over-the-counter to veterinary feed directive status. They are now in veterinary feed directive marketing status and fall under the authority of the 2015 VFD rule, which has already been in effect since last year. I'm not going to go through all of the approved applications. We're looking forward to reporting those in December, as we've mentioned. What I did want to point out here, for example, oleandamycin and penicillin are underlined. Those are examples of applications that currently only have production claims on the approved labels. And so barring the addition of a therapeutic claim between now and December, which is a really short period of time, we would no longer expect to be seeing them in medicated feed. The neomycin, lincomycin, tylosin, virginiamycin, chlorotetracycline, and oxytetracycline are italicized because there are approved applications that have either only production uses or production plus therapeutic uses. Again, our expectation is those production uses will be withdrawn, so the therapeutic uses remain, and then they will transition to VFD status. So what are some key elements of the VFD regulation, the 2015 version? So we have posted on the, I'm not going to go through all of the detailed requirements of a VFD order with you today. We have brochures that are posted on the Center for Vet Medicine website for producers, for distributors that manufacture feed, for distributors that don't manufacture feed, for veterinarians and for veterinary students. And you're free to click on those links and download the brochures to get a more detailed publication of the responsibilities for each of the folks there. So my intent is to just touch on some highlights of the rule, especially those where they differ between the 2001 VFD rule and the 2015 rule. First is distributor. A distributor is any person who distributes a medicated feed containing a VFD drug to another person. That other person may be another distributor or the client end user of the medicated feed. And so we recognize there are generally two types of distributors, those that are manufacturing the feed and distributing it, or those that are only distributing the feed. And we've asked those folks that intend to distribute VFD feed to give the Center for Vet Medicine a one-time notification of their intent to do that, and the address is here. I'm pleased to say there are some 4,000 folks who have done that, and that's posted on the CVM website, and we're still getting substantial numbers a week, and so roughly each month that website is updated with the folks that have notified us of their intent to distribute VFD medicated feed. Another section is the Category 1 versus Category 2. In the 2001 rule, if a drug was a VFD drug, it was automatically put into the Category 2, which had implications regarding a licensed feed mill. I want to mention that in the 2015 rule, that was revised so as to not to cause that automatic recategorization under the VFD rule. Expiration date and duration of use. We've received a lot of questions on that, and so my first point is I want to emphasize that this VFD expiration date is the expiration date of the Veterinary Feed Directive Order authorizing the client to obtain and use the medicated feed, not the expiration date on the Type A medicated article from which that medicated feed is made. Those are two separate and distinct concepts which unfortunately share the same terminology. That VFD expiration date is, if it is on the label of the approved application, that determines the length of the VFD order, the expiration date for the VFD order, and it is on there for virtually all of the current VFD drugs. If it is not on the label, and it is not for most of the, if not all of the medically important ones that are transitioning in December, then by rule, we set that time to be cannot exceed 6 months after the date of issuing the VFD order. So the veterinarian may write a VFD order for a shorter period of time, but not longer. The other concept is the duration of use. This is essentially the period of time that the animals are ingesting the medicated feed to receive the therapeutic benefit of that medicated feed. That will also be on the label and will be part of the VFD order that is written. We have had the question come up, and so we've included it in this presentation. If a VFD order will expire, so you're at the end of your period of time, and the animals are not completed their duration of use of ingesting the feed, what can the producer do? And what we've said is we would ask the client producer to contact his or her veterinarian to request a new VFD order that would cover for the next period of time for that authorizing that use. So here in tabular form is, and I'm not going to read through all of them, for the current VFD drugs, although I don't have tivalicin on here, it's just a tabular representation of the expiration date versus the duration of use for these products. We appreciate in January this will be a bit longer table. Refills. Refills is a concept that carries over from prescriptions, and although the 2015 VFD rule allows for the opportunity for refills, it allows for them if they are on the label of the approved application, and at the moment there aren't any refills approved to my knowledge on those labels, and so we're not expecting refills to be, as a practical matter, to be occurring in the VFD world in the near future. So the concept is a VFD order expires and you issue a new one. Approximate number of animals. In the 2001 rule, the veterinarian was estimating the amount of feed, the tons of feed, and then the 2015 VFD rule, they're estimating the number of animals, the approximate number of animals that are expected to ingest the VFD medicated feed within the expiration date of that VFD order. We understand that that is fostering communication between the veterinarian and the feed manufacturers and distributors to calculate dry matter intake and to estimate the number of tons of feed that would be required there. Okay, combination VFD drug. A combination VFD drug is a veterinary feed directive drug and another drug. That other drug could also be a VFD drug, for example, neomycin and oxytetracycline, or that other drug could be an over-the-counter drug. So those drugs that I told you are not impacted by the VFD rule, if they're used in combination with a VFD drug, they still need to be authorized on the VFD order when they're used in combination. That gives rise to three options for the veterinarian. We refer to them as affirmation of intent. First, I'm authorizing use of this VFD drug and this VFD drug only in the medicated feed. Third, I know I skipped two, I'll come back to it. Third, I'm authorizing use of this VFD drug and every other drug that the Center for Veterinary Medicine has approved to be used in combination with this VFD drug. Or second, for whatever reasons, I'm authorizing use of this VFD drug plus certain specific other drugs that the Center for Veterinary Medicine has approved to be used with this drug, but not all of them. And there may be various business reasons or whatever for folks doing that. So with respect to the current VFD drugs, this has not been an issue because there aren't combinations approved except for the use of tilmycin in cattle. So those of y'all that have been writing VFD orders for a number of years realize that or appreciate that tilmycin could be used alone or tilmycin could be used in combination with monensin, and that'll be as an example of a VFD drug plus an over-the-counter drug authorized on the same VFD order. Substitution of VFD drugs. This is the notion of substituting a generic for a pioneer drug. And I always read these paragraphs to make sure that I get my wording right. So if the veterinarian does not specify that a substitution is not allowed, the feed manufacturer may use either the approved pioneer or an approved generic VFD drug to manufacture the VFD medicated feed. However, the feed manufacturer may not substitute a generic VFD drug for a pioneer VFD drug in a combination VFD medicated feed if the generic VFD drug is not part of the approved combination VFD drug. What does that mean in English? Okay, as an example now, for the current products, as a practical matter, it means that only the generic tilmycin could be substituted for the pioneer tilmycin for the control of swine respiratory disease, but not for the other indications. Again, we appreciate that this table gets more complicated in January. Veterinary client-patient relationship, we have a number of slides here, and I'm going to probably not go through each of them with you. We had a number of questions regarding the veterinary client-patient relationship early on in the rule, and we've interacted with each of the state boards of veterinary medicine and worked out with respect to the state definition of a veterinary client-patient relationship, which is something that most all veterinarians that are practicing in a state should be familiar with, or the federal definition. If the state-defined definition of a VCPR applies and has 3 key elements, I just skipped over the 3 key elements, but we'll not go back to them. So if the state VCPR had those 3 key elements and it applied to the issuance of a veterinary feed directive order, the state VCPR will apply. If either of those was not true, then the federal VCPR definition fell as the default. And what we've done is listed on the Center for Vet Medicine website, and the link is here, each state and whether it's the state or federal VCPR definition that applies in that state. And we understand that a number of states are going through, and if you don't mind my saying, tweaking their authority so that their state VCPR may apply or will apply in the future. And as that happens, our intention is to update CVM's website so that that's up to date with the current authority. When will this go into effect? So I'm repeating myself now, but the notion is the VFD rule went into effect on October 1st of 2015. It was impacting those products that were in veterinary feed directive marketing status at that time, and Tyvalicin is an example of one that's been added since that time. December of 2016 is the target date for all of our drug sponsors to implement the changes to use conditions that we're expecting under Guidance 213. We look forward to publishing all of that on the CVM website in December, and then as of January 1st, we've said that we're expecting all VFD medicated feed to be authorized and used after that time with a lawful veterinary feed directive order. There are some other notes in here, websites for our VFD website, Judicious Use, and Bluebird Label website, which people have found useful. Those of you that are on Twitter or want to get email updates from CVM, you can do that. And with that, I want to thank you. And I'll make one quick comment, and then I know we're going to turn it over for questions later. If we're not able to answer all of your questions today during the panel part, at this time in the presentation, I've always been saying we're inviting those questions to come in to ask CVM, ASKCVM at FDA.HHS.gov. We can repeat that for you, ask CVM, ASKCVM at FDA.HHS.gov. Folks that have questions about, and many people have detailed and very thoughtful questions about the implementation of the VFD rule, please send them in to us, and we're working out answers for them and get them back to you. Thanks.